Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the San Jose State Spartans, who are fresh off a 7-6 season in which they appeared in the Easy Post Hawaii Bowl. They recently wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 27th. We have a very special guest joining us today. Please welcome to the show, Christian Vieyra, managing editor for The Spear, and Christian can be found at the C Vieyra on X. Welcome to the show, Christian.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to talk about Spartan football here at San Jose State.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in sports journalism and sports reporting.
Yeah, so I grew up in a town called Windsor here in California. It's in Sonoma County in the North Bay. And then after high school, I ended up at Santa Rosa Junior College, which is like the biggest city in Sonoma County. And from there, that's when I started in journalism. I joined a newspaper, the school newspaper there called the Oak Leaf, and I found out that sports reporting would be an avenue for me. And I was like, I'm going to go down that avenue. And from then on, I just got my AA there in journalism, and I transferred here to San Jose State because a big reason I transferred here is because of something they have called The Spear here, which is a strictly sports publication from the student run. And we also have a magazine as well as a website, and we also produce podcasts and videos as well. So it's just been a blast, and that's, I found out sports was something I could do coverage wise, and I just went with it.
That's pretty awesome. A lot of schools have student papers, but I don't. This is the first one I've heard that where you have a sports dedicated student paper.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big selling point of why I chose San Jose State, besides it being 2 hours away from my home. So yeah, big selling point for why I chose this school.
So San Jose State had a roller coaster of an offseason, and it all starts with the guy in charge, the head coach. They lost Brett Brennan to Arizona, and then they hired Ken Niumatalolo. What can you tell us about Coach Niumatalolo and what he brings to the table for San Jose State?
I mean, to start off, he brings a lot of head coaching experience. I believe he was at Navy for 15 years. And, being a coach at Navy, that comes with a lot of discipline. I mean, that's one of his big things. And as well as he values like that family feeling with the team. And that's something he's preached since day one. And the experience thing, I know that's something our athletic director, Jeff Konya, wanted. According to ESPN, once Brent Brennan announced he was leaving, that was like the coaching search. They were looking for someone with experience, and they got someone with experience. But yeah, Coach Ken, he's really disciplined, familial feeling. But all the players have said so far that he's such a nice guy at the same time. Like, he knows when to put his foot down, but at the same time, he does it in a really nice way. And another thing of note that's kind of interesting that players have brought to my attention is he also doesn't cuss and encourages his coaching staff not to cuss as well. Something you don't normally see in a college coaching staff, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So as typical, when the head coach leaves, you usually lose most, if not all, the assistants. And San Jose State kind of and that falls in that same boat with the offensive coordinator. So they hired Craig Stutzman to come in and run the San Jose Spartan offense and install his spread and shred offense, is kind of what he calls it, which for a lot of folks that maybe just hearing them hire Coach Niumatalolo, just immediately think like, oh no, we're going to the triple option.
Yeah.
And that's and this is like the complete opposite of the triple option. This offense that Craig Stutzman is going to trying to install here. But what can you tell our listeners that may not be familiar about this offense?
Yeah, so to start off, like you said, everybody's reaction here was, oh no, triple option. Is that going to work here? But then we see the hiring of Craig Stutzman and that spread and shred. And from my understanding, just talking to Craig Stutzman about it, spread and shred is kind of derived from that air raid offense and the
run and shoot.
Run and shoot, exactly, yeah. And he also, I expect a lot of like option routes with the wide receivers and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I've also talked to some of the quarterbacks about too, and they enjoy, throwing in this offense because it's a pass-heavy offense. So even though it's a pass-heavy offense, I also like to say they did emphasize they are going to run the ball too. Coach Craig told me that he's actually previously learned under Packers head coach Matt LaFleur, and so he wants to take some concepts from that Shanahan LaFleur McVay offense style when it comes to the run game of things. But of course, it's still based in that spread and shred, run and shoot offense. So yeah, a lot of passing, air raid. I think it's going to be exciting for Spartan fans to watch. Those quarterbacks sling the ball.
Yeah, when Coach Stutzman was the head coach, I think it was at Utah Tech.
Mhm.
They had a 1,000-yard rusher. And I don't know if ironic thing is the right word, but it was Quayle Conley, right?
Yeah.
Who was at San Jose State. We'll get to him in a little bit, but he's transferred away. But so yeah, it definitely seems like he definitely is. He definitely looks to include the running game and not solely just pass around, but they do throw it around a lot as well. Let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that is the quarterback. They lose a really good quarterback and last year's starter, Siobhan Cordero. He graduates, but they returned Jay Butterfield and Walker Eggett, and they bring in transfer Emmett Brown coming over from Washington State. By all accounts, early on, this was I think a 5 or 6 man quarterback race. But then as spring practice went on, it kind of narrowed it down to 2 folks vying for that spot in Emmett Brown and Walker Eggett. What can you kind of tell us about the quarterback competition in the spring and how those guys looked?
Yeah, so it was kind of surprising. A lot of Spartan fans were looking at Jay Butterfield, thinking he was going to be the next.
Sure, yeah.
He got a lot of those garbage time reps last season when Brent Brennan was the head coach. So when that first came out, and when Coach Ken and Coach Craig both told me that Emmett and Walker, everybody was a little surprised. But just talking about those 2 quarterbacks, first off, Emmett, Washington State transfer, he's a little on the short side, but I will say he can throw the ball. He did have a really nice play at the spring ball game. He threw about a 60-yard ball. Not the ball 60-yard, but it was a really big pass that was a 60-yard play. And then also Walker Eggett, he's more of a traditional style quarterback, I'd say. Stand in the pocket, and he's tall on the taller side. Both of them was, I was kind of surprised myself. Another person that I thought was going to be in this race more was Anthony Garcia, but I kind of found out he wasn't, and then he ended up transferring to Arizona following Brent Brennan. But yeah, and then like I said about Emmett Brown, he was also a more dual threat quarterback in a sense. It sounds like he can use his legs a little bit more than Walker. But in my opinion, I will say I think Walker is in the lead just based off the spring game because he got more of the reps, most of the reps. He went out with the ones, and he got a little bit more than Emmett, but Emmett definitely got the second most reps. But that's just my opinion. That's not according to the coaches. Coaches say
Absolutely.
otherwise.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's hard. I feel like sometimes coaches feel like, to me, especially when it comes to quarterbacks, they're in one and two boats. They're either very brutally honest, and then you see guys leave because they're so honest, or they keep things very close to the vest because they don't want guys to leave, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, can certainly appreciate that.
And another thing I wanted to mention about the quarterbacks real quick is Coach Ken said that they will be looking in the transfer portal to see and open to competition from someone in the transfer portal too. He did say that after the spring game. So that's another, you never know, who can come in here.
Especially in this day and age.
Yeah, it seems like, yeah.
Moving over to the running game, which was a strength of the 2023 team, they lose Kyrie Robinson to graduation, and we talked about Quayle Conley earlier, transferring to Arizona, but they return Jabari Bates and Caden Collins, and they also bring in Floyd Chalk IV from Grambling State. How did that group look in the spring?
That group was really interesting. I think there was 2 leaders essentially. It seemed like Floyd Chalk was the leader at first, but then on the day of the spring game, Jabari Bates got the 1 reps, but I will say both of them got a lot of even reps. And along with Caden Collins, he did get some reps too, but it was mainly Floyd Chalk and Jabari Bates. And so I would guess you could say Jabari Bates is kind of the running back 1 because he went out with the ones. But yeah, and that's someone Coach Kenny Matalolo in the week leading up to the spring game told me. He said he's probably surprised me the most and impressed me the most with Jabari Bates, which kind of caught me off guard because I originally remember hearing Floyd Chalk was that guy. And there are 2 different backs. Floyd Chalk's a little bigger. I guess you could say more physical compared to Jabari Bates, who's a smaller size. But yeah.
If you had to take a guess, how do you think it kind of works out? In the fall, do you think it's going to be like a committee approach where they're both going to kind of get, somewhat maybe even playing time or 60-40 playing time? Or do you think maybe there'll be a workhorse guy and they'll just ride that one guy?
Honestly, I think Floyd Chalk is going to be maybe I'll say 60-40.
Okay.
Just based off what they did at the spring game, it seemed like they were switching every other drive when they were on offense. Well, I mean, and so maybe I'll say 60-40 on him. I guess Floyd Chalk's going to get more of the reps just because of his build. He seems like more physical when he runs the ball. And obviously, they weren't fully tackling that game, so I
Sure.
can't really say for sure. But just off their build, I think Jabari Bates is someone who's more quick, shifty, but he's also the smaller advantage. So I would worry a little bit myself, but if I was the coach picking that. But yeah, I'm not too sure, but I'm going to guess 60-40,
With
50-50.
with Chalk moving up from the FCS to the FBS, did he look like an FBS ready player to you, or?
Actually, yeah. I mean, he took the running back room by storm. I remember talking early on when he got here to the coaches and even himself, and he was excited to be here. And he was originally getting the reps with the ones at practice, if I remember correctly. And he was kind of like in the drills. He was the leader of the room. It looked like he was the first one to do all the drills that they were doing with the running backs. So, it's hard to say if he's FBS ready till he really goes out there and plays. But I
He didn't
believe
look out of place like during practice or anything.
no, he looked like he fit in.
Awesome. Okay. Let's go over to the passing game because, as we said, in the spread and shred offense, they're going to throw the ball a ton, but they get a boost with Nick Nash returning, and then
Mhm.
Justin Lockhart coming back after missing the 2023 season due to injury. But they do lose Charles Ross and Isaac Jernigan. They also bring in Trayshawn Hurry coming over in the transfer portal, coming from Weber State. How did this room shape up during the spring?
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a mishmash deal. There's still not too much clarity yet with the wide receiver room, other than the fact that Nick Nash is like the clear leader. That's what all the coaches said. I believe he's in his fifth or sixth year. I might be wrong, but he. And another thing interesting about Nick Nash is he hopped in the transfer portal, and the next day he came back. So he
Yeah.
took it out. Yeah, took his name out. But yeah, he is definitely someone who's been a clear leader in that room, and all the coaches have said, and he's getting the reps with the ones. Of course, he's like the leader. Yeah, that's who I would say.
How is Justin Lockhart's recovery coming along, and when do they expect him to kind of be ready?
Yeah, they're not too clear on that. I mean, from what I've seen at practice, at first he was on the sidelines with the wide receivers, not doing the drills. And then he started to slowly build up, and maybe at first he was start to run the routes but not catch anything. And before the spring game, he was starting to like catch a few balls, but he did not play. So he's coming along, but I'm not too estimated. It's not. I'm not. I don't have an estimate of when he's going to be ready.
Gotcha. Um, in this offense, that they have outside receivers and slot receivers. Any kind of indication, like who the outside guys are? We know that Nash and Lockhart and even Hurry, in the past were primarily outside guys.
Yeah.
Are they going to move one of those guys to the slot to try to get all three of them on the field, or someone else going to play the slot?
I'm not too sure, honestly. A lot of different wide receivers got reps. I feel like that was the group that got the most at spring game. I mean, maybe a guy like Cooper Hosh, number 15, I think
Yeah,
he got a
and
lot of
he
reps.
was a walk on, right?
Yeah, he's a walkout, and he might be one of those guys. Malachi Miller, but I'm not too sure yet either on that.
In the past, tight ends were used quite a bit at San Jose State. However, in this new spread and shred offense, they aren't. In the past, they haven't really been used. But we saw numerous reports this offseason where the coaches kind of commented on how talented the tight end room was, and that they needed to find a way to get them more involved in the offense. Now, mind you, all these comments were made before Sam Olson recently departed
Yeah.
and entered the transfer portal. But with given his departure, what can you tell us about this tight end room? And do you think they're still going to try and find a way to get tight ends involved, or?
It sounds like yes, they are going to try to get tight ends involved. What Coach Ken was telling me, he said, don't expect them as much as last season with that offense. But I know Skylar Loving Black is a guy they're looking at as the next tight end. But he also told me that's another position they're going to look at in the transfer portal. But he made it sound like they were going to be semi involved. But I wouldn't expect too much out of that position group, just based off the offense and the scheme.
Yeah, that's kind of was my takeaway. It was just interesting to hear them kind of talk about that in the off season in terms of getting them involved. And then, probably the top tight end turns around and leaves. That
Mhm.
kind of, to me, that is a little bit of an indication that maybe they weren't going to be used a whole lot to begin with.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
The offensive line also takes a hit this offseason, losing 4 of 5 starters and a top backup. What did the Spartans do this offseason to kind of shore up the offensive line, and how did they look in the spring?
Yeah. So what I heard, a big thing was the hiring of John Estes. I've heard nothing but good things about his as offensive line coach. And another thing is, I don't know. I don't think they have attracted too many guys in transport or anything yet. I think they're just going off of what they had last year. And one name that kept coming up was Marist Talavo, I think is how you say his name, but they kept saying Mars. He's been that main presence, and I mean, well, from what it sounds like, is they feel pretty confident in their O line of the guys that they had behind those guys last year. Yeah, so the starters. So yeah.
All right, with this brand new offense, a lot of changes coming on. If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in the fall, who would that be?
Yeah, my choice was actually going to be Floyd Chalk. I think the running game is going to be a surprising strength. I mean, not necessarily surprising strength, but yeah, I think the spread offense is going to do wonders for him. And you could say Jabari Bates too. I think the running game in general, both those running backs who are going to get that big load, it looks like this year. I would expect them to get a lot of yards and maybe even touchdowns more than we expect with this offense, just because of the spread offense. They'll have more holes with the O line. So yeah, that's who I'm going with.
All right, sounds good. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, and unlike the offense, the leader of the defense does return, and defensive coordinator Derek Odom. The
Yeah.
2023 unit finished second in total defense in the Mountain West, first in pass defense, and in the Mountain West, 16th overall in all of college football. Let's kind of start with the guys up front along that defensive line. They lose Trey Smith to Arizona, Noah Lavulo, and Jay Kakiva to graduation. They return Soani Toa and Quincy Lakio, among others. How did that unit look this spring, and did anyone stand out for that defensive line?
I mean, in general, the defense in general just dominated this spring. That was the narrative that was coming. The coaches were telling me, and specifically among the D line, Sawane was the guy that Derek Odom highlighted the most, who's kind of stepped up and just been that stalwart on the D line. So yeah, that's definitely the guy. But in general, that whole D line looked really good this spring. So yeah.
The moving to the linebackers, they lose leading tackler Brian Parham, who's off to Washington, but they do return second leading tackler Jordan Pollard and Teniela Latu, among others. How did the linebacking group look this spring?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've even talked about with Coach Craig Stutzman, is how those guys were challenging the defense and just flying all over the field. And those names you said, Jordan Pollard and Tanalia Latu, and Jordan Cobbs was another guy. Those three were just kind of all over the field, it sounded like, at practice, during scrimmages and stuff. And they were on the spring game too. So those are the linebacker cores who I would expect this year.
The defensive backfield took some losses as well, losing Trey Jenkins, Chase Williams, Kenyon Reed, and Andrew Jenkins to graduation. They
Mm-hmm.
bring in Larry Turner Godden from Texas and Robert Rahimi coming over from Liberty. How did those guys look this spring, and did anyone step up for the defensive backs?
Yeah. So with those two guys, I guess there was a little bit of a learning curve, you could say, learning a new defense. It's just more like learning the verbiage of the defense. Like, oh, this is the coverage, and we call it this here. That's what Coach Dio told me, Derek Odom. But as a whole, they also look good. They're like a veteran group. Guys like Michael Dansby, who's kind of like stepping into that leader role. DJ Harvey is another guy. And then, and then Larry Turner Gooden looked really good too. Transferring in at the spring game, he actually had a pick six in that game off of Emmett Brown. So that was like one of the highlights of that game. So maybe he's a big play guy. I don't know yet. We'll see. Hopefully he can be.
All right. If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
I was actually going to go with Larry Turner, good, just because of that highlight play. I like to see that someone make those plays, but I could also say someone like Jordan Pollard in the linebacking core. he had a really good season last year, I believe. And yeah, I could also see someone like him being that breakout player too.
With spring practice now over, which
Mhm.
position group or groups do you think is the most concerning?
That's a tough one. The O line is a little concerning just because I don't know how much reps those guys have really gotten in game. Another thing is that wide receiver room outside of a few guys. It depends on how Nick Nash is probably going to be the main guy, of course, but it depends on how the other guys develop and who they bring in. Because I'm expecting a lot of movement with the transfer portal is what I was led to believe for like every position almost. So that's another one. But I would say the O line is someone I'm a little concerned about just because those guys haven't gotten the game time reps.
Sure. What would you say is the main strength of this team heading into the fall?
It's definitely that defense. Every guy on the defense I talked to was just happy that they got to keep Derek Odom and they could just kind of roll into this new season with the same strategy, same play calling, and yeah. So and they all love Kenny Montalillo too, but they're just glad that the Derek Odom stayed, so they kind of continued on what they were building on last season and the past season. So
Yeah, and having that consistency is a key, and it's probably a big part of why the defense dominated the spring, trying to install a new offense as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
When it comes to recruitment of new players and the retention of existing players, the NIL and transfer portal is such a huge deal these
Mhm.
days. What kind of impacts have you seen there at San Jose State?
I mean, it's not ideal here, I would definitely say. I think that's why a lot of our better players transfer. Someone I think off the top of my head who I talked to last season, his name is Fernando Carmona Jr. He was a tackle for us, and he transferred to Arkansas in the SEC. Um, and NIL opportunity is not little to none. I know there's the Blue and Gold NIL collective here with the donors, but something back to Fernando I was talking about is something unique here at San Jose is actually he had his own burrito at this restaurant that I actually wrote about last year. So I mean, it's a giant burrito because he's a big tackle.
Yeah,
But that was like one of the only NIL deals that I thought that was really cool. That he had his name. It's actually called the Fernando Burrito, and for some reason the restaurant still sells it. I don't know if they know he transferred to Arkansas or not, but they still sell it here. And every now and then my friends and I will go get it. But yeah. So, but outside of that, I think NIL is not great at San Jose State. The other sports are definitely impacted by it as well. I mean, I'm not to switch to sports, but basketball is really impacted by
sure.
that, and all the other sports as you go down, and it really affected some of the other teams' seasons and stuff. But it's not ideal, is what I would say.
Yeah, and it's hard at the G5 level
Mhm.
because you hear some of these numbers thrown around, especially in basketball, where a guy's making a couple $100,000 a year, and you're like, that's like the whole budget,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
football and basketball. Much
yeah.
less, can we have paid one basketball player that kind of money? So yeah, definitely a disadvantage for the G5. When talking about the portal and NIL, and it seems like the head coach is really turning more into like a general manager type role, because they have to recruit freshmen, they have to recruit their own current team, they have to try to retain their current team.
Yeah.
They have to do fundraising, for the NIL, fundraising for the university. And it seems like it's becoming less and less about the X's and O's as a head coach. Kind of, did you see that kind of happening at San Jose State there? Or?
Yeah, a little bit. Since Coach Shen got here, well, when he first got here, he made it clear that Craig Stutzman was going to be the play caller, for one, and he's also more of a. I see him at practice, and he kind of watches everything. He'll walk around from drill to drill from different position group and watch everything. And another thing I wanted to say, he almost acts as an ambassador for San Jose State football in the sense of recently, in this past maybe month or two, he's been going out to other professional sports games and doing, whether he went to a San Francisco Giants game and threw out a first pitch, or a San Jose Sharks game and had the puck drop. I think he was even at our MLS team, the San Jose Earthquakes game. They have like a siren that they do before the game, and he got to do that. I think that's it, but he might have done more. But he's just been, playing that like ambassador role, almost getting our name
Sure.
out there. And then also, yeah, he has talked about, his role in recruiting guys here and what he's looking for and stuff. So that's definitely one of his priorities himself, is being that recruiter and, yeah, being that that guy for San Jose State almost.
All right, the 2024 football season is over, and you're looking back on it. What has to happen for you to say, "Hey, this season was a success"?
Um, I would like to say my personally would be them competing for that Mountain West championship, not necessarily them winning it, but them being in that race towards the end of the season. I think that would be a really successful season considering we were, in the race for it last year, although there was the Mountain West computer said and the ranking said we didn't,
Yeah,
but that was
yeah.
kind of our own fault for losing some games that we should have won. So I would say, kind of continuing what Brennan did and making a bowl game. I think that would be a successful, and yeah, but I also wanted to note that Coach Ken's idea of successful on his first day press conference, his idea of success was making the college football playoff because it's going to be expanded to 12 teams. So that's a pretty high goal. You probably have to be undefeated to make it as San Jose State, but that's his ideas. But so me and him have different ideas. But
I think the Mountain. I mean, just kind of how they did things last year. I mean, the likelihood is it's only going to be one G5 representative that's going to get involved.
exactly.
I mean, even though technically more could be, but it's probably only going to be one. And to your point, kind of sadly, it's probably going to be like who goes undefeated, and a lot of times that doesn't necessarily mean the best team.
Yeah.
No offense to Conference USA, but Conference USA is probably the weakest conference in all the G5, and so there's going to be a lot of years where their conference championship goes undefeated or has one loss, whereas the champion of the Mountain West or the champion of the Sun Belt or the American might have 2 losses or even 3 losses, right? But they might, on the football field, they might really be the better team. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see, I think, how that plays out. And if it continues to play out like it did last year, where they, it seems like they almost just simply went off record. And yet Liberty had a great season, but they also played the weakest schedule in all of college football. And so it almost seems like that didn't matter. But it'll be interesting to see if that continues into this new playoff era.
Yeah, I'd like to see how it plays out for the G5 teams. It would be nice to see anybody from the G5 make it to the playoffs. But it's interesting to see it. I agree with you.
So we've talked a lot today about San Jose State football. We talked about the offense, the defense, and all the coaching changes. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to share or think that we should know about this 2024 San Jose State Spartan football team?
I guess one thing that I'd like to highlight is in our schedule we're going to play Stanford, and that's going to be a renewal of the Bill Walsh legacy game. He coached at both schools, I believe, and I think he might have played here. But so it's kind of cool that Stanford is like about 20-25 minutes away from San Jose State. So I'm really excited to see how that game, and it's going to be a renewed rivalry. We're going to play them, for the next couple seasons. That's the one game I'm excited for to see and how the Bay Area turns out, hopefully, because, the fans here aren't always at the games, I would say, San Jose State. So it would be nice to see our stadium filled up, even if it's majority Cardinal Red Stanford fans. I think that would be cool to see it filled up.
Well, thank you again, Christian, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me, and I'm willing to do this again if ever needed.
Well, we will definitely keep you in mind for next year, and hopefully we can have you on again.
Yeah.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.
Spartan Nation on your feet.